And good morning, everyone, and welcome back. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. This is what I call my morning musings. Pardon me. I'm in the midst of sharing with you some thoughts in response to Dr. William Lane Craig, who is a noted Christian apologist. But some while back, he wrote some objections to the true preterist view, as well as the partial preterist view. And he basically gave three objections. Pardon me. We've already examined the first two. His third reason for rejecting the preterist view is the resurrection of the dead. And he says, Paul looked forward to Christ's parousia, or coming, and the resurrection of the dead. Remember, in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, he says that Christ himself will descend from heaven with a shout of command, and the archangels call, and the trumpet of God, and the dead in Christ will rise first. 1 Corinthians 15, he says, the trumpet will sound, and the dead will be raised imperishable, and we shall be changed. And so, Dr. Craig's argument, number one, it's entirely presuppositional. He assumes, without any proof whatsoever, that the resurrection of 1 Thessalonians 4 and 1 Corinthians 15 is a biological resurrection. Now, again, that's presuppositional. I understand where he's coming from, but you still have to prove that this resurrection that he has in mind must be a physical event. His argument is basically like this. The coming of the Lord will be at the time of the physical resurrection. The physical resurrection has not occurred. Therefore, the coming of the Lord has not occurred. Well, it sounds good, and in form it's valid, but it's presuppositional. But here's the problem. Let's go back to Dr. Craig's number one objection, what he gave as his number one reason for rejecting the true preterist view. And that reason was, we must view the coming of the Lord from the perspective of the individuals who heard the promise. That Christ must return to the place, and in the perspective of the people to whom the promise was made. Okay, let's look at 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 15 and verse 17, where Paul said, those of us who are alive and remain until the coming of the Lord. What was Paul's perspective? What was the perspective of the Thessalonians? And what was the perspective of the Corinthians when Paul said in 1 Corinthians 15 and following, brethren, I tell you a mystery, we will not all sleep, but we will all be changed. What was the perspective of the promise of the resurrection? Was Paul not writing to and about living, breathing human beings 2,000 years ago? Now remember, this is Dr. William Lane Craig's very first objective, that we must view these promises of the coming of the Lord from the perspective of the observer, or the objective perspective, of the person hearing the promise. If not, why not? It's a valid question. After all, what is audience relevance? Audience relevance demands that we first of all ask the question who, what, when, where, why, and how of any text that we are reading. Who is talking? Who are they talking to? Who are they talking about? Look at the when question. What happens when we apply the when question to 1 Thessalonians 4 and 1 Corinthians 15. The when question is answered from the perspective of the, quote, observer. The when question is answered when we answer the when question of the readers. And Paul emphatically said, those of us who are, that's a present active indicative. He does not say those alive at that time, whenever that might be. He said, those of us who are, that's in the present tense, those of us who are alive, and those of us remaining until the parousia. Twice he said that. And in Corinthians, again, he said, not all of us will sleep. Euphemism for death. So, using Dr. William Lane Craig's own hermeneutic, his own objection, that we must honor a text, that we must honor the promises of the coming of the Lord from the perspective of the observer, from the objective of the listener, from the perspective of the one to whom the promise was made. He has destroyed his own argument. And of course, to reiterate, his argument on the resurrection is presuppositional. And we'll have more to say about that on the flip side. In the meantime, hope you have a fantastic weekend. Man, I've got work, mounted up to here. But for an in-depth discussion of this language of Thessalonians, we who are alive and remain, you need to see my book, We Shall Meet Him in the Air, The Wedding of the King of Kings. Go to my website, www.eschatology.org or BibleProphecy.com. Order the book, say that you saw the offer on YouTube or Facebook, and I'll refund your shipping. This has one of the most extensive discussions of Paul's language of we who are alive and remain until. You don't want to miss this special study. Order the book. Thanks again for joining me for this morning's Morning Musings. Lord willing, you'll see me again on Monday. Have a great weekend.